Hello. We are constantly working on improving the system, so we frequently release updates for our products, including the readers. The new firmware corrects errors found during the use of previous versions and expands the functionality of the devices. Currently, there are two fundamentally different methods for updating the internal software of the reader. The first method is updating using the Sigur Settings app. The second is centralized updating of Sigur readers directly from the software using the SSDP protocol. I would like to remind you that SSDP is our proprietary setting over the OSDP protocol, allowing developers to supplement or expand its functionality. We have a video on the features of connecting Sigur MR100 readers with this protocol. Let's start with the update using a smartphone. We will need the Sigur Settings app, available for mobile devices with the Android operating system. The procedure will look as follows. Turn on Bluetooth on your smartphone, as well as location services and Wi-Fi or mobile internet. Then we launch the Sigur Settings app. The application will automatically download the new version of the reader's firmware as soon as it becomes available. Next, the Reader Settings tab will display a list of all available readers. The list includes the device model, its serial number, and the signal strength level. Let's select one of the readers from the list to update the firmware. Then we will press the Update Device button. The program will display the current version of the reader's firmware, as well as the availability of an update. We will select one of the available firmware versions and press the Update button. The program will prompt for the entry of the default device service password Sigur. For repeated actions with this reader, you will not need to enter this password again. If you need to reset the password to the default, you can use the function to reset the reader settings to factory defaults. This can be done both through the app and physically. More information about the hardware reset of the reader to factory settings can be found in a separate video or in the documentation on our official website. After entering the password, we wait for the firmware file to finish sending and for the reader to update. Please note that during the firmware loading, the reader will change its indication. The LED will light up yellow. After a successful upload, it will proceed to apply the firmware, changing its indication. The LED will blink yellow and white. After the update, the application will notify us of the operation's results, and the reader will emit a characteristic sound. All previous settings will be retained, and the device will be ready to use immediately. The app also supports working with multiple readers at once. The procedure will be similar to what was previously mentioned. However, at the initial stage, to enter the update mode for multiple devices, it is necessary to long press one of the readers, after which you can select several more. The number of selected readers is displayed. Then click Next button. Update device. In this case, all the same scenarios are possible as with a single reader. If there are any ambiguities in the actions, the application will display information about this, and you will be able to skip and not update the reader using the Skip button. After selecting necessary firmware and pressing the Update button, the application will update the internal software of the readers. You will be able to see the progress of the operation in the application. So, we updated the Sigur MR100 reader through the Sigur Settings mobile application. Now let's consider the process of centralized firmware updating for the Sigur reader directly from the software. This method is only applicable in cases where the reader is connected to the Sigur controller via the OSDP interface. In other words, this capability is a distinctive feature of the SSDP protocol, allowing the firmware of the reader to be updated to the current version centrally from a workstation. So, let's start with the technical requirements for this method. The firmware version of the reader must be no lower than 43. A controller of model E2 or E4 is required. The version of the controller firmware must be at least 18. For the update procedure, we need the file of the current version of the reader's firmware. Currently, you can request the file by contacting Sigur Technical Support or in the relevant section on our official website. Let's proceed with the update in the Client program. Go to the Equipment tab and access the Settings menu of the access point. On the OSDP tab of the device for a specific controller port, we will click the Select button in the Firmware Upload block for the reader. A window will open to select the firmware file for the reader. You need to choose the file and click the OK button. The process of loading the firmware onto the reader will begin. During the loading, the Select button will change to Loading Firmware and will be enacted. Successful upload completion will return the select button to its standard state, and the system event log will show information the firmware of the reader has been successfully updated. If you have any difficulties or questions, you can always contact Sigur Technical Support. That's all from me. Thank you for your attention.